Welcome to Product Copy, everybody. I'm Jason Brett. We host this weekly series of virtual meetups to help product managers become excellent product managers. Wherever you are in your career, we want to help you be better. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Holly Jewell, to introduce today's topic.
Hello, and thank you. So today we are wrapping up our February series. If you're just joining us, as Jason said earlier, or you're new to how we're running this, we typically have a series that runs for the entire month. On a topic, and so this year we started in January with our first 90 days in a new role, and we're moving through a what would we be doing, right? So our February plan was around market analyzing, assessing, and evaluating our market, making sure we have a good fit with our market and our product before we go further and try to say things with a strategy. And when you're coming into a new product or a new role, that's often been done by your predecessor. So it's super important not to miss that opportunity to evaluate what they've done, evaluate what the company's position is, and say, do I agree with that? Does this need to be tweaked? And if it's a product you've had forever, it's still an important thing to do periodically as you come back and reevaluate. Our February series has been on those pieces. And so today's session is just we're bringing it all back together and saying, okay, we've talked about market research. We've talked about competitive intel. We've talked about all these different aspects throughout the month. How do we bring that all back together? And it's a group discussion. So I'm looking forward to everyone's thoughts on this.
So, just by show of hands, virtually in the room here in the Zoom room, curious to know how many people were at our have attended the first couple of sessions. Where did you see the initial session on market research, and how many of you saw the session on competitive intel over the last 3 weeks? Just throw your virtual hand up there, real. And you can do that by going to the reactions panel at the bottom of the
I like
screen. There
Allison's,
we
the
go.
real hand, the
There we go.
actual real
Yeah, you can
hand.
do
Thank
that
you.
too. That'll work.
Human hand.
Talk to the hand. Yeah, we got quite a few of you were here. One of the things we really wanted to do today is start off by just recapping and talking about some of your key takeaways from those earlier conversations. And specifically, we talked about in that first session the notion of market research. And really love to reflect on our discussions about market fit research and how they apply to your current strategy. And I know a lot of people are out there in the markets, out there looking for an opportunity right now. So if that's your case, think about your last role or an opportunity that you're interviewing for right now, and talk about how you are thinking about market research today versus how you were thinking about it a few weeks ago. Jump in here. It's a town hall discussion.
I'll hop in on this. One of the things that I found most helpful, particularly given all of the sessions previously, your first 90 days, et cetera, allowed me to ask better questions during the interviewing process for various roles. And I appreciated that because as a professional with more experience than I'm probably willing to admit, we've got ways of doing things. This was new ideas. This was new language to use. This was a new framework to apply. And I found that immensely helpful.
Love that. Great feedback. I
I
feel the
wanna
same. Go
I
ahead.
wanna echo what Lori just mentioned. I found it incredibly helpful, especially when you're getting to that very last point in the interview process and you're able to bring something fresh and something that they hadn't thought of maybe to the table to distinguish yourself from the other candidate. I leveraged that to the hilt, and I thought it was very helpful. And this was a Teams interview. I didn't get a chance to go on site even during the final ones. I wonder how I would handle it if I was in a one-on-one situation with about 10 people in the room. But I leveraged that 90-day to the hilt, and I found it incredibly helpful, and it did bring a new sense of skill set to my company that I was interviewing with.
Cool.
I like that, George. I'm gonna jump in and say for me, obviously I'm biased. And as Jason also added that I have helped prepare some of this stuff or create it in the past and evolve it and iterate on it over time. But it was very good for me because it was what I needed as well as I'm taking on a new thing and I'm trying to figure out how do I start this and where do I start and what have they done, the founders and the people who came up with the idea so far? And where are we really? What do we think we know? And do we really know the things we think we know? Or is this just all interesting conjecture? So it was very helpful for me, these sessions, both you were talking about the first 90 days of the last month there, and then really these last couple session topics, even just because it's been very much what I needed to focus on in my head. And sometimes it's talking about it as a group It's massively helpful. We were saying that about book club, talking about what you read gives you different perspective and you know it differently. You understand it differently. You learn some new language, like Lori was saying, to use. But for me, it's the same thing. It helped me think about what I needed to do, the steps I needed to do, and have different thoughts and dialogue around it that I don't think I would have had. And some of that was very critical and has been very timely.
Yep.
Blossom, I see you got your hand up, honey.
Yes, I just have a couple, just two questions based off of that. First of all, I do go to a lot of networking events because that's part of the job when you're looking for a job. And I do tell people about product coffee. And I think the last person I spoke to, I told him about how one of the sessions was about the first 90 days and he was really excited. And now he's asking me to learn more because product coffee just does not exist for a lot of people in their own internal team. They just never heard about it or there is no development for product manager. So this is a great resource. And then my questions are, so I'm looking at the productcoffee.com website and I see that the competitive intel with Michael Marks is here, but I don't see the other one that I missed, off to market evaluation and research. I'm assuming that do you all upload it on a certain cadence?
Yeah, so that one we're still doing some final editing on that one. It'll be up there soon. I for our premium members, I will also drop. We keep a backup recording in a private area of YouTube. I'll drop the link in there so you can have it today if you need it. But we'll also have the final copy up there in the portal very soon.
I probably did something extra that they're taking more time to edit out. There's probably
No
some extra.
problem. No problem. And then if we have time, I would like to hear how people are presenting their 30, 60, 90-day plans during the interview. Because my interviews are only 30 minutes long and they always seem rushed. So maybe at the end we can talk about how to do that. If we have time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a quick 30-second response on that, and then we can come back and talk about it more deeply if we have time. Essentially, in most interviews, you won't have time to present the whole 30, 60, 90-day plan. What you can do is you can present a high-level overview of the framework and the approach that you're going to take. One of the resources that we have in that kit is your first 14 days. And going through that and talking about your first 14 days and some of the key artifacts like your learning backlog and how you're going to use them in your first 90 days to navigate the company, understand the issues, understand the product and the market very quickly. Just telling them that you have a framework is a key part of it. And you can even tell them where you got the framework if you want to. I don't think that hurts anybody. But the point being that you say, I have this massive workbook and this massive deck that I will begin filling out on day one with all the information that I need. And here's what my first 14 days look like.
Perfect. Thank you.
But I would like to come back and maybe in the Slack channel, we could have a discussion actually about that. Cause George, you've leveraged it pretty clearly in your interviews and Lori, you've mentioned that. So let's have a discussion about that on Slack as well. Allison.
I was just going to add on to that, but if you want to shift, we can shift to another question. I just lowered my hand.
Yeah. Give it 15 seconds and then we'll move on.
Sure. So I was in the job market last summer and had a process that very similar to the 30, 60, 90 day. In fact, it's inclusive of that. When I got through each of the hiring processes where it went to final, I reached out. Obviously, you send your thank you for your time and consideration, but you give a quick elevator pitch to, hey, I'd love to share with you with what I heard and how I can have impact and drive value here. Maybe you do that at the end of the conversation. Maybe you do that in your thank you email. But both of my opportunities that I went to final rounds on gave me 15 minutes with the hiring manager. And that's all you really need to say. Here's how I can deliver value the first 30, 60, 90 days. Again, you're not going to show them 40 slides, but you're going to give them the 5-minute readout, let them hear and resonate. And then in fact, you'll probably get a better idea if you're in the final considerations or if you're going to get a thanks by email in a short order.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
You bet. George.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point because I know we need to move to the next topic, but to the point that was just made, what I did is the first bullet in each one of the 9A process, I spoke to it. I memorized the first line of each one, and then I spoke to each one as I walked down, hopefully I captured a lot of it. Apparently I did, of what I had gone through the 90-day process. So that's what I did. I
Okay.
just, that was the cheat sheet that I used, is the first line. And then I spoke to everything, spoke to that, and hopefully captured what was incorporated in there.
Yeah, I love that, George, and you've heard this from me as Jason's heard it as well. But I had not a hiring conversation, but a conversation with a CEO that would be very difficult. But basically, they were not where you think we are. Right, we were way behind where you thought we were, and you're like asking for, when's this going to be built, and so we haven't even confirmed that we should be building or what we're building. Is it
Right.
an ark or a camper? But either way, but I literally just had that worksheet from that we're talking about the January stuff, right? The first 90 days in a new role. And I just had that worksheet open in front of me and was just like conversationally just picking out these are the steps that needed to happen and what we have to, you brought me in, I have a process. This is what I'm going to go through and what I need to do. And just conversation, just being able to call that out in a way that was very intellectual, probably much better organized than I would have just done in my own ramble, made it a very productive and very successful conversation versus, oh gosh, this is not going well. And the first thing I should do is get rid of this product person.
All right. And one of the things about a town hall discussion like this is we can totally change the topic if we want to. So this is obviously a topic that's hot on everybody's mind, and we can come back around to it as much as we need to. But I think part of that first 90 days and that delivering value in your interview discussions as well, for those of you who are looking for a new opportunity, is being able to speak very clearly to foundational principles. And one of those foundational principles is the series we've been doing this month, really focusing on market and opportunity analysis. And as we think about the market analysis, one of the things that I've observed along the way is that the more mature a company gets, the very often people forget to ground themselves. The organization as a whole can often forget to ground itself in some of those fundamentals, like specifically the importance of understanding your audience, not just the audience that you have, but the audience that you intend to have. Exactly. Recognizing their needs and their preferences and their behaviors. And that was one of the takeaways that I got from the first session that we did that Blossom was talking about, that we'll get up on the repository here pretty quickly. But we talked about gathering and analyzing the data and all the different ways that you can do that, from qualitative to quantitative methods to actually going in and pulling out data to understand your market based on interactions that you are having, based on, and this isn't just about competitive analysis, but we did shift into competitive analysis as well. And that spawned a discussion that we had a request. Some folks had seen Mike talk about competitive analysis on another webinar and said, hey, could we have Mike come talk to Product Coffee? And so we did that second competitive analysis and dove a lot into using data to understand that. And when we think about aligning that to our current strategy, the reason that's important is very often, at least what I've observed, is very often the business strategy evolves as companies grow. The things that were important when the company started evolve and change as you learn your market. But very often market research and analysis, especially in those kind of Series A, Series B companies, can lag those changes. As a product manager, whether you're a candidate or you're inside the organization, being able to go and make sure that you can clearly articulate the current business strategy and go back and refresh research and be very intentional about refreshing the research that you've got and speaking very clearly to the changes and how they impact the product is a really important aspect that gets missed a lot of times. We get into the rut of building the feature that we promised we were going to build because it made sense a year ago, and now we haven't delivered it in the last year. But we need to constantly turn that handle and make sure that we're still focused on the right. What else have you seen?
Like Scott's comment in the chat, we did talk about that when we were going through the session on competitive intel, but it's a great it's a great point, right? And that's the key. Market research, all of this, evaluating do you have market fit? And is it the market that you have, or is it the market you want? And then re-looking at that competitive intel, like you just said, Scott, right? Like it's got to be iterative. You've got to have a process in your product organization where you come back and revisit that periodically, even if you've done it. So you're like, oh yeah, the quality of that work is awesome. You're not, questioning your predecessor in that scenario like you would be in a new role. or coming into a startup and you're questioning what the founders and investors came up with and what dope they were smoking, right? But if it's yours, you still have to come back and check it. And Scott, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that since I've just called you out for what you said in the chat, but it was great. I loved it.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering if there were better signals for knowing that your data is stale. Like the approach I take is I can't improve the data, so I want to improve the process of collecting the data. And to your point, right, laying on that iterative cadence. But the only intuition I have for knowing how frequently I need to do that in the context of how quickly a company's market is moving, customers are moving, competitors are moving, because I jump around, like I don't have a home as a consultant, is the intuition from Nielsen Norman groups. How often do you do research? If I keep hearing the same things, then I know I'm teching too frequently.
That's a good point. Yeah, there is a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, very true. And you don't spend all your time doing that, right? There's so many things you have to do in product. That's, I think, why this was so top of mind and important to me for us all to remember as we're starting a new year, because it's one of those things that drops off your radar, at least for many. You're probably all better than me, but it certainly has for me at many times, because it's just that you did it, you packed it away, you went, oh, that was good. It was good enough for the time. And it's just you get so busy with all the other things that we are responsible for in product that you don't get to come back around. Even if you think about it, it's the you don't have time. And you get stuck there.
Yeah. So I just wondered if anybody had better ideas of signals other than external events, right? Surprise launches or whatever than that. Lori hopefully got an awesome answer.
So
I don't know if it's awesome. You might give me too much credit. The other thing to consider is with your research cycle, these kind of external factors that are happening. For example, many people this morning in their intros mentioned AI, right? That becomes a great reason to get back out there with your customers and looking again at the market to see, all right, how has this latest news shifted trends? What's happening with all the layoffs, right? We're talking about obviously organization shifting. How is the loss of people within those organizations going to impact how they use and interact with your product, right? So that gives you two excuses right off the bat to get back out. And Scott, I totally agree your point with Nielsen Norman. General rule of thumb is start with 5 people, and the point at which you start to hear repeats, you're definitely in a good spot.
And then if you start to hear different things, so we did a book club on Teresa Torres's continuous discovery habits last year, I think it was. Yeah, last summer. And one of the things that she really advocates for is making sure that you have a constant process in place to continue to discover and validate what you're working on, what you could be, where opportunities you could be working on right now, and the opportunities that you are working on right now. Are we heading in the right direction? And there are lots of forms that can take. And Scott, to get back to your question, Mark, if you're doing that, you're constantly working on new product development, either new products or enhancements to existing products or fixing things. So I believe that we should generally constantly be taking those things to our customers and to our users and to our market to say, hey, here's what we're doing. Is this hitting it for you? And when you start to see, when you start to hear, this was important to me a little while back, it's not important to me anymore, there's a signal for you. And it's because you're doing that in the context of validating work that you're currently doing, that you've already committed to doing. But then the other side of it is there should be, if you're doing a good job with in your product management role, you're constantly keeping your finger on the pulse of a few things, I believe. One is my business strategy in the first place. Has that evolved? Am I hearing new things from our senior leadership in terms of the direction that we should be going, the markets that we should be addressing? That's one of them. You're also keeping track of the competitive landscape and understanding the cadence at which your competitors are doing things. Just when are their conferences? When do they tend to make big announcements? And what are the big announcements that they're making? Scott, you mentioned a moment ago, a surprise launch. If you see something that the competition is doing, I don't advocate chasing the competition all the time, but I do advocate keeping your eye on them and understanding why they're doing the things that they're doing. So that is still absolutely one of your signals. And then the third thing that you're keeping track of is the technology landscape, and I'm speaking mostly to technology product management. This applies in some other areas as well, but in the technology space, you're keeping track of the technology landscape, what's shifting, what's growing. Blockchain made a lot of big waves a little while back. Gen AI is making a lot of big waves right now, especially. And so understanding when major suppliers and vendors in these emerging spaces are having releases, how they're working, the problems that they're solving can give you those signals that there are shifts coming not only to possibly how your market is perceiving the world, but also into the tools that you have at your disposal to solve the problems that you're trying to solve. My friend Devin is behind the camera today. He's on the other side of the switchboard, and he's a big advocate of jobs to be done and jobs theory and does a lot of work in that space. The jobs rarely change. When you understand the jobs, they rarely change. Who's doing the jobs and how they're doing the jobs can change.
Drastically.
And if he hadn't put his hands on the headphones to come around, yeah, that's okay. I'm not making you do that. But I know he's probably biting his teeth too. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go into that whole big soliloquy, but I saw, let's see, I saw Rob's hand go up earlier and then it went back down. Let's see here.
Here, I'm chatting away on this.
Go for it.
So you were talking about research and when do you know you need to do this? And I was working for a previous company where we had this huge revenue kick up.
Mhm.
And the CEO was so like, he's like, we need another big hockey stick, right? I wrote hockey stick, right? A big hockey stick of revenue growth. And he was like, I need to do this again. How do we do this again? And I was like, this isn't sustainable in a SaaS model. We
Right.
need a consistent growth of
Right.
subscriptions. And that was a huge indicator to say a few things, right? We need to make sure we're securing and retaining that revenue over the X amount of period that we had. But also, why is that happening? Is it a one-off fluke? Or so looking at revenue and just in that, it's a little retroactive, but is it a sustainable growth or lack thereof? And if you're losing revenue, why are you losing revenue? So it's a little proactive, but it's a little reactive. And if you can get a line graph of it, maybe if they could de-identify numbers for you from a consultant perspective, just to be able to see what's been occurring in the last year, that would be a really good indicator that we need to go research. And it probably is like a quarterly or annual thing. But anyway, that was my 2 cents.
Yeah, I like that, Beth. I was going to jump in. I think, and this, a couple people just chatted the same thread. I do think there has to be an always on part of this, right? Like you're following your competitors on LinkedIn, Google alerts, things like that, that give you, right, the daily nuggets as things happen. But I do think it's easy for that to just get lost in the noise and just miss what the competitor or what the market is doing. If you also follow analysts, or if you hit like your G2, Capterra, Forrester, Gartner, IDP, IDC, what
I don't
was that?
care.
Yeah. You eventually have, right, almost too much information. And so the key is finding what's the driver to refresh it, intentionally refresh what that is. And not mention this, but for me, oftentimes that's been a win-loss review.
Mhm.
Company has done quarterly, right, twice a year, whatever it is, deep dive win-loss review. And inevitably the question comes up about competitor, right, A, B, or C. And so I think then actually let me look at competitor A's LinkedIn to understand what are they talking about? Is something changed? Is something different? Not just the noise of every day, but an actual planful, thoughtful approach to do the analysis, right? Same thing, reading the blog posts on their website to understand, are they talking about something differently? Because, and I go back to the Michael Marks, for those of you who weren't in the competitive, had a phenomenal Venn diagram for how you attack competitive, right? In terms of understanding your strengths, their strengths, white space, et cetera. And I think it's important to understand that to then be able to focus your energies on the things that will really add value and not just get caught understanding or trying to bury a competitor as opposed to moving your company forward. Back to Beth's, how do you grow your revenue
that might mean, right, a target against a competitor, but that might just mean paying attention to what you need to do and not worrying about competitors.
That's a great call out, win-loss reviews. And I remember Jeff, for those of you who don't know, Jeff and I worked together in our earlier part of our career for quite a while, actually. And I remember for a while how difficult it was for our product management team to really get insight into real win-loss data. We had some sales-driven data that gave us some insights, but having those formal win-loss reviews, it took us a long time to get those spun up. I wonder how many of you have experienced that. How many of you, just by show of hands in your recent roles, virtual hands, use the reactions panel, have had easy access to win-loss data, or has it been very difficult for you to get? So I gave you a show of
That's a
hands.
pretty compound
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
for
it
the
is.
reaction
He
If
panel.
loves
you
to do that.
raise your hand if you have had good access to win-loss data. There we go. Yep.
Now raise your hand if you did not.
Yeah, it's been I see it's been a struggle for a lot more people than it has been a strength.
When it's all the things we talk about, many companies are resistant, surprisingly, to doing win-loss,
Mhm.
period. Either leadership doesn't understand it or doesn't value it, or sales is threatened by it. Everyone takes it as this defensive attack on the sales team that we want to go dive into why we lost, especially, right? Versus one, let's focus on why we won. But also, it's important to understand why we lost because it probably isn't just Bob is a bad sales guy. It's probably more in depth than that. It's always good to know, right? If it is as simple to fix, it's just Bob needs to wear different shoes next time. Good things to counter. I think that's part of why it's hard. And then even if the company's doing it, it's happening often in a different group from product. It's something that we're not engaged enough in, or we're not getting that data. So I think that there's multi levels, but it doesn't surprise me at all that more people struggle with it, given the fact every time we talk about it, we talk about how few companies are really doing it well or really using that data.
Yep.
I think there's other ways too that you can get data that's helpful, that's maybe not win-loss. So one of the things I like to do is just look at our close rate, our loss reasons. I don't know, depending on what system you use or what's captured. Sometimes you can just get that data and do some analysis on that. And we use Salesforce at my company. I'm sure a lot of you do. But I get monthly reports of data that tell me what our close rates are, how they're moving up and down, but then also what the reason for the loss was. And if the reason was product or functionality, I specifically watched that to see if that's going up or down or moving in any way. And then I also can tell when a deal goes from when the deal is lost. So if the deal is lost after our demo, then I know that it's probably lost due to some product reason. Not always, right? But it's like a good indication if they see the demo and then after the demo, they decide not to go into like the negotiation phase, that I know that's a potential good data point to look at. And just recently, our sales consultants team put in a new tool where they're actually capturing deal breaker reasons. So if they're missing a particular feature that we don't have, and that's the reason they don't go with us, our SCs are now capturing that for us. So we have even more data coming in now around that. So even if you don't have formal win-loss, there's ways that you can look at just the data of the deals and how they move through the system and how they're won or lost, and do analysis on that data to get some of that information. And I look at
Right.
that on a monthly basis.
That's a great point, Anna. And Toshi, I love what you just said in the chat. I think when we talk about win-loss, a lot of it depends on what are the questions you're asking. And like you were saying, like, a lot of information is there if we're looking for it the right way, if we're digging in the right places, or if we're asking the right questions. A lot of win-loss conversations may be invaluable if we're not asking the right things, and then we're informing sales strategies and not product strategies.
Yep. I like that you're looking at the trend of is it changing? Is it drastically changing, and watching for that? And I'm curious, Anna, was that essentially relegated to, I don't know what you use for a CRM, but is it essentially relegated to a field in Salesforce is where you're getting
Yeah,
that data?
we use Salesforce.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that's not the only, one of the things that we do really well, I think, at my company is we have MBRs and QBRs, and I don't know if you guys have those, but we look at a lot of data every single month. And so not just the sales data, but utilization, like data, all sorts of, I'm amazed at the amount of data that we look at, and we look at it on a monthly basis. And so we watch those trends really carefully. And each of our product managers is expected to analyze their own data each month and provide commentary. And we discuss it each month. And that to me is a really great way to make sure that what you're working on, you're hitting the right outcomes of what you expected and we're working on. But it also keeps you on pulse of the trends in the market, because if you start to see a trend over a couple months of something happening, it makes you be like really curious, like, why is that happening? And sometimes it's a market condition, right? So it's like a pointer for you to go look at whatever your hypothesis is, to like, that's a trigger to maybe go do some more market research in that particular area. So that's a way that I think has been really good for staying close to the business strategy.
I'm so jealous that you guys have that data. I've never been in a position, I feel like, where the company had access to or really had that kind of stuff. You talk about the data that you need, and it's like, oh, well, okay, you want to spend X to go build in the ability to track utilization in that app? Why? Because it's important. Yeah, exactly.
It's hard. Like, it didn't happen overnight. It took a lot
Yeah.
of work to get to all that. And it's time consuming too to look at it each month and analyze it. But I
Yeah,
really
for
think
sure.
it's worth it. And it helps us make better product decisions. Hey,
Okay, Jeff.
Jason, something that you taught me a long time ago that stuck with me is I know we're not chasing competitors, but something else from like a research perspective, I don't think we've talked about this, is actually going to look at who our competitors are hiring and what roles they're hiring for. I don't think we've talked about that, but that may be a little bit more proactive. Remind me your smart words about it. It's
I-
just always stuck in my head to go look at where they're hiring, or set up like a LinkedIn alert for those competitors, right?
And I think I actually learned that from John, but looking at who your competitors or who different companies in the marketplace are hiring can give you some insight into some strategic shifts that they're making. There was a time that Apple started posting some roles for automotive engineers. And it was like they were like really quiet. And I can't remember, and a few other examples like that. But looking at the open positions and the types of subject matter expertise that your competitors are hiring for right now can give you some insight into the types of things that they're looking at and finding important. Uh, a lot of times there's not much there, but a lot of times you can at least understand, hey, are they growing? Are they not growing? And if they are growing, what direction do they seem to be growing in? And it's not just their product management roles, it's their development roles, it's their sales roles, it's what subject matter expertise are my competitors hiring for. I see Laurie's got your hand up for just a minute too. So bring it on in, Laurie.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the chat, but I want to reiterate. If you have access to a proposal management team, proposal services, and I've had this in my last 2 roles, these folks are great sources of information, because we're talking in the chat, the sales teams are going to give you their perspective on why we won or why we lost. And I think it was Scott's comment, nailed it. If we won, it's because I'm great. And if we lost, it's because you're bad. So from a product perspective, yeah. But proposal services, in my experience, has actually taken a much more measured and balanced approach, particularly when these proposal managers that I've worked with in the past have also considered competitive analysis when forming the basis of their proposals, because they're familiar with who the likely competition is, and they're going to take that into account. So that's just a nugget that I found to be helpful.
Very good point.
Absolutely. Also, Jeff points out proposal service is also referred to as the RFP guy/gal.
And I say this because oftentimes that person is embedded somewhere in a sales operations or sales enablement team, protected and out of the way from product. But I would agree that's a great person to get to know, because they will tell you, we're seeing this trend in RFPs or whatever else. And oftentimes sales is thinking about how to answer that, but that doesn't make its way back to product to be like, wow, why is everyone suddenly asking about blockchain in a social media app? That doesn't make any sense. So
And one of the reasons that's a great insight, Jeff, is, and thank you for reminding me of that. And I'm remembering RFP Monkey way back in the day. But one of the reasons that's a great insight is, I don't know how many of you have been involved in a purchasing process before, but very often The way RFPs get written is one of the early vendors to the table helps helps a customer write an RFP. And so the questions that show up on an RFP, or they come from an analyst firm, for example.
Yeah.
And so the questions that show up on the RFPs themselves are often insight into things competitors have told them are important. And they're agreeing and saying, yes, this is important for me. So it's not just giving you insight into how your market's thinking. It's also giving you insight into how your competitors are thinking in many cases as well. So
Yeah, it's a great point. And you were taking me back, Jason, because I was like struggling to remember why we were doing well with things at a company where I was challenged trying to get win-loss analysis or just performing win-loss interviews in play and was fighting leadership on it. It was because I, as the product portfolio leader, actually was the respondent to all the RFPs. So I actually did have to, I got that information firsthand because there's not enough people to wear all the hats. Really, it was your product. So somebody took a first cut. We did have the RFP monkey, as you said,
Yep.
but that it was all right, now let's make sure that the product blesses that, yes, this product can do the things that we're saying it does. And sometimes they were wrong. And I had to do a lot of tweaking there. But that let me, seeing those questions was critical. And as my good friend Rob pointed out in the chat, also your customer service department. Be besties with them. Like your call center, like bring them, I don't know, cupcakes or donuts or something periodically, just sit in there and hear the things that are coming in from your customer base. It's amazing. And if there's a good way, Anna said, data to get that as a readout or something like that's invaluable to get that mass data. And now you can churn it through all kinds of AI and get out the export of all the key themes or whatever, right? But just sometimes just sitting in the room, you'll be amazed the things you hear on the back ends of conversations. And you're like, wait, when they get off the call, what was that about? Amazing learnings.
Yep. Blossom, you have been patiently waiting for a moment. Let's come on in.
So we know that sales teams are typically not supposed to win, or they're not supposed to do the win-loss questionnaires and whatnot. But what happens if they do?
So
What do you do for those situations?
yeah, I saw that conversation in the chat, and we're probably going to have a little debate here. And this is a debate with everybody.
It's fine because the internet is entirely on my side.
Fine. The product management internet is entirely on your side. I think, first of all, there is a hierarchy, right? We do no win-loss analysis, very bad. Then there is sales does a one-dimensional or owns all of win-loss analysis, slightly less bad. Best is win-loss analysis is, I think, run personally, my opinion is when win-loss analysis is actually run by a product marketing function that takes into account the sales need and the product management understanding and puts together a robust view of why we're winning and losing in the market, not just in the sales process. Sales needs absolutely that information that they protect this analysis for, because they need to understand what are we doing, what are we not doing in order to actually make dollars and get the coins in the machine. But product also needs the information. Marketing strategy needs the information. Finance needs the information in some cases as well. So it's a big function that needs to be completed by a robust part of the team. When sales owns it to begin with, it's because there was nothing, and that's where it started. But we need some better tools, and I don't have a strategy on this, but I think this is, Scott, you might lean into this as well. This is a really good conversation about how do we as product comfortably influence so that we're creating a better conversation in our organization around that win-loss analysis. Jeff, I know that you and I have both been in situations where we had bad win-loss analysis, bad practices, and then you've been in some situations where you had some very good practices. I would love to hear from some folks on that topic and how you can improve it. And you can argue with me now too.
I noticed how you just conveniently moved it so that there was no opportunity for that.
That's right.
I was gonna say, Rob, was your hand up on this topic or another one?
Just took it down.
Right. Yeah, I think, Jeff, if you want to close that out, then I've got something I'll tie back to what you said before.
Yeah. So the good things, at least Corey, the things I think that we did well were we went ahead and we actually set up a campaign in Salesforce with the help of our marketing team to send an email to lost deals. And we actually offered a gift card. Not everyone took it. Not everyone took advantage of it, but we said, hey, would love, I can't remember. I think we tried 25 and 50 alternate times, but would love a conversation, and it was from a product manager. So we rotated which product manager it was sent from. So if they replied, there was a Calendly link, and they could just schedule time on the calendar. And then we had a set of questions to run through and ask. And I believe that after I think we sent 2 emails. And if they didn't reply on the second, we sent a third, which was just, hey, if you don't want to talk, would you mind answering this quick survey? And we gave them just a simple survey to answer. And we got more responses to that than you would think. Now they're not in depth, right? People didn't leave lots of detailed quotes and things like that, but we got some yes, no, or some ranges, 0 to 10 kind of ranges on why we lost. So we could at least make some assumptions, right? Or infer, yeah, hey, what the salesperson heard was correct on that, right? And that was one of the things we thought about is the sales team said we lost on price. And then we have a conversation and we're like, it wasn't exactly price. It was more that they're already using this company for 3 or 4 other things. So it wasn't really a price. It was, they're already embedded. This is right. One more thing from that vendor versus a brand new vendor. And so a lot of those things do then help to adjust messaging, positioning, and sometimes actual product features.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that, especially in the space where you're working in SaaS products that are more B2C. One of the ways that you can get some of this equivalent win-loss information is by looking at folks that have abandoned in the sign up flow. If you capture the information, you can send them an email to try and recover them. But you can actually ask them like, hey, what's the reason why you wouldn't want to purchase our service today? What are some of those key things? And I think that's really important because we think about this maybe in a silo in terms of these are enterprise products or B2B products. And ultimately, we need to remember that it's going to an end consumer. And we want to make sure that we're capturing that information. And Jeff, going back to what you'd said before on one of the earlier sessions, when we were looking at that Venn diagram, it was like light bulb went off. Think about the data that you're getting and prioritize it. Take it with a big grain of salt because what your competitors are doing might not be the right thing. It's really what are the customers? What are your current customers and your prospective customers? What are their hopes, dreams, desires, pain points? Those are the things that are going to help you most. And if you're proactively doing that research and you can validate that, yes, what we're doing is right, and ultimately tie it back to, okay, is our business strategy still right? Or has everything shifted and, oh my God, we need to have this big conversation and leadership needs to see this because they might be thinking everything's great. We can keep doing this forever. And then you get into the Kodak scenario, right? No one's buying film anymore, digital. And I think it's really important. Again, that Venn diagram really hit home for me. And it also made me remember whatever you get, question it. Were the questions biased? Or are they answering something one way, but they're using it a different way? That's where AI can summarize it, but you're going to have to validate it.
Yes. That's a great call out. And with that, I think we're at the top of the hour. We aren't at the top of the hour. We are at the top of the hour. It is time to wrap this up for today. I do want to take just a quick moment to thank everybody for being here and part of this discussion. This session will be up on our premium portal in a day or two. There's an instant access view available for everybody in the Slack channel. There's an announcements channel within the team that will have a link to this on YouTube. You should be able to get to that in minutes. But I also want to remind everybody who hasn't joined Product Coffee Premium already, if you're not a member of our premium team, please come join us. It's what we are building. We're building a community to help you achieve product excellence, to help you be the best product manager that you can be wherever you are in your career. We have a variety of leaders. We have a variety of well-experienced practitioners and coaches in our community who are all dedicated to becoming excellent product management people. And we would love to have you join us there. It is, if you register before March 1st, you can get that coupon and get it for $399 for your first 2 years. It's normally $499 a year. We also have monthly and quarterly options if you're interested in that. But you get professional development workshops like the first 90 days workshop that everybody's been talking about this morning. And then you'll get our product market fit workshop at the end of this week. And we do a new workshop every single month. And you get the recordings for all the past workshops, all the resources that we create, access to all of these events. And very soon I'm sending out coupons for swag from the store to all of our members as well. And we will look forward to seeing you there. Head over to productcoffee.com/premium and join us there. And with that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here. Holly, can you tell us what we're doing next week?
We are kicking off our March series, which is going to be on, you can probably guess the progression that we've been on, right? February being market and opportunity. Our March is going to be on revisiting or aligning our value proposition and our strategies. So we're going to just continue on with where we would go next if we were truly just flowing this through, and that's where we're headed.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week and hope to see you all on Friday. Bye.
Be there or be square.